Sometime in the last decade, the Social Security Administration quietly removed a tool from their own website. The tool was a break-even calculator. It was designed to help American workers figure out the best age to start collecting Social Security benefits. The agency built it. They maintained it. They linked to it from their main retirement planning pages. Then they deleted it. The reason, given quietly and carefully, was that citizens were using it incorrectly. People were looking at the calculator's output, treating it as a final answer, and making major decisions. People were looking at the calculator's output, treating it as a final answer, and making one of the biggest financial decisions of their lives based on a single number. The federal agency in charge of Social Security looked at how Americans were using their own helpful tool and decided that no tool at all was safer. The agency that controls a multi-trillion-dollar program decided that its own citizens weren't equipped to make the most important math decision the program asks of them. If the government won't give you the tool, you have to learn how to think about this yourself. That's what this video is for. I'm going to show you the 7 real conditions under which filing for Social Security at 62 is the mathematically correct decision, not the emotional one, not the lazy one, the correct one. By the end, you'll see why the standard delay until 70 advice every finance channel repeats is actually only right for about half of Americans, and why for the other half, it's quietly costing them tens of thousands of dollars in benefits they paid for and will never collect. I'm Jack. I cover the kind of money math nobody else wants to put on a video because it doesn't make a clean thumbnail. Hit subscribe if that's the kind of breakdown you want. New videos every week. Section 1. The longest bet of your life. Before we get to the 7 conditions, you need to understand what Social Security filing actually is. Not what financial advisors call it, what it actually is. It's a bet, the longest, most consequential bet most people will ever make in their lives. The bet is simple. How long will you live? The U.S. government gives you 3 filing options. You can start collecting at 62 with a smaller monthly benefit. You can wait until your full retirement age, which for most people watching this is 67, and collect a moderate benefit. Or you can delay until 70 and collect the maximum monthly benefit. The math is structured so that if you file early and die young, you win the bet. You collected more total dollars than the late filers ever will. If you delay and live long, you also win. You collected more, just compressed into fewer years. The crossover point, where it stops mattering when you filed, is somewhere in your early 80s, depending on whose numbers you use. So the entire decision comes down to one question. How long are you going to live? And nobody knows. Not your doctor, not your advisor, not you. The whole game is making this decision with incomplete information. The mistake almost everyone makes is using the wrong life expectancy number. They look up U.S. average life expectancy online, C79, and use that. That number is wrong for this calculation. That's life expectancy at birth. It includes everyone who died as an infant, a child, a teenager. If you've already reached 62, you've already survived all of those statistical exits. Your remaining life expectancy is much longer than the at-birth average. The Social Security Administration's own actuarial tables put the average remaining lifespan of a 62-year-old American at roughly 22 more years. So if you've made it to 62 in reasonable health, your statistical death date is closer to 84. That's the number that matters, not 79, 84. And depending on your health, family history, and circumstances, your personal number might be substantially higher or lower than that. The entire break-even math shifts dramatically based on this number. Move it up or down by just 3 years and the optimal filing age can flip completely. That's the uncomfortable truth at the heart of this entire decision. There's a second variable that almost every basic break-even analysis ignores, and it makes the standard advice even more misleading. It's the cost of living adjustment, the COLA. Every year, Social Security benefits get adjusted for inflation. If inflation runs at 3%, your check gets 3% bigger. This isn't optional, it's automatic, and it compounds. Here's the part most people miss. If you delayed filing, your base benefit is bigger. That means your COLA increases are also bigger in absolute dollars. A 3% raise on a $3,900 monthly check is a much larger raise than 3% on $2,200. Over 20 years of compounding, the gap between those two streams becomes enormous. In a basic break-even model where you set COLA to 0, delaying from 62 to 70 might gain you about $72,000 over a lifetime. Add a realistic COLA assumption, say 2.5% annually, and that same delay can gain you $246,000 over a lifetime. That's not a small adjustment. That's the difference between a strategy that's optional and a strategy that's clearly correct. But, and this is where it gets layered, that only matters if you actually live long enough for the COLA amplified checks to add up. If you die at 75, the COLA amplifier never has time to work. It compounds against you instead, because you would have collected less by delaying and got fewer years to enjoy the difference. So now the bet isn't just how long will I live, it's how long will I live and how high will inflation run during those years. This is part of why the SSA pulled the calculator. The decision genuinely has more variables than a single online tool can show you cleanly. Here's a coordination move that doesn't make it into most YouTube videos on this topic. If your spouse never worked long enough to qualify for a substantial benefit of their own, or their benefit is much smaller than yours, they may be eligible for a spousal benefit equal to up to 50% of your full retirement age benefit. But they can't collect that spousal benefit until you file. If your household has a large earnings disparity, this is huge. The higher earner waiting until 70 doesn't just delay their own income, it delays their spouse's spousal benefit too. Filing at 62 unlocks income for both people in the household simultaneously. This is the scenario that, in my experience, financial advisors most often overlook. They run the math on the primary earner's optimal filing age in isolation. They forget that the household has a second person whose access to income is gated by the first person's decision. Condition 4. Your spouse has a serious illness and a higher benefit than you. This is the most counterintuitive condition on the list, and in my view, the most financially important. Here's how it works. If your spouse is the higher earner and has a serious health condition, their expected lifespan may be shorter than average. When they pass away, Social Security gives you, the surviving spouse, the option to switch to their benefit, the survivor benefit, if it's larger than yours. So the strategy becomes, file for your own smaller benefit at 62. Collect it while your spouse is alive. When your spouse passes, switch to their larger survivor benefit. You're not delaying, you're not maximizing one income stream, you're collecting both across the lifespan in sequence. Here's a concrete example. Take a woman I'll call Linda. She's 62, recently retired, married to a husband who's 65, with a higher Social Security benefit, but also a serious heart condition. Linda's benefit at 62 is about $2,100 per month. If she waits until 67, her benefit increases to roughly $2,900. That's $800 more a month. Sounds great. But her husband passes away at 69. If Linda had waited to file, she would have collected zero of her own benefit for those 7 years, then switched to his survivor benefit anyway. By filing at 62, she collected approximately $176,000 in her own benefits over those 7 years, before switching to the larger survivor check. That's $176,000 she would have left completely uncollected by following standard delay until 67 advice. This is the single condition where I think early filing is the most logically airtight, regardless of most other factors. Condition 5. The stock market just crashed. This one is academically discussed in retirement planning research, but almost never makes it into mainstream content. If you're drawing down your investment portfolio in retirement and the market drops 30, 40, 50%, like it did in 2008, like it did briefly in March 2020, selling assets to cover living expenses at a 50% loss is brutal. It destroys your portfolio's ability to recover when the market eventually does. But if you turn on Social Security during the crash, you create a guaranteed income floor. You stop selling at the bottom. You let your portfolio sit and recover. Filing early in a crash is a hedge against what economists call sequence of returns risk, the danger that bad investment years early in retirement do disproportionate damage to your long-term outcomes. The flip side, if you haven't started drawing down yet and the market crashes, you could turn on Social Security and use that monthly income to buy discounted equities. You're effectively using a federally guaranteed income stream to fund opportunistic stock purchases at a deep discount. That's not reckless. It's actually one of the cleanest moves in retirement finance, though almost nobody talks about it that way. Condition 6. You're in a low-income window before RMDs kick in. There's a tax wrinkle most people don't think about until it's too late. After age 73, the IRS requires you to start taking required minimum distributions from your traditional retirement accounts. These distributions are taxable income. They can push you into higher tax brackets and increase the share of your Social Security benefits that gets taxed. Up to 85% of your benefit can become taxable above certain income thresholds. If you're currently in a low-income window, say you've already retired but RMDs haven't started yet, your Social Security income might be taxed very lightly or not at all. By filing at 62 and collecting during those lower tax years, you bank guaranteed income at a favorable tax rate before the RMD wave hits. Some retirement planners call the moment when RMDs collide with Social Security and pensions the tax torpedo, the year your effective tax rate jumps unexpectedly and stays elevated for the rest of your life. Filing early can be a way to spread your taxable income across more years and lower your lifetime tax bill. That's not the obvious frame for this decision, but it's a real one, and almost no general advice considers it. Condition 7. You genuinely need the money. I'm going to say this without any condescension because it applies to more people than want to admit it publicly. Life doesn't always follow the financial plan you made at 35. Medical bills happen, businesses fail, pensions disappear. Adult children need support. Layoffs hit at 58, and the job market doesn't welcome 58-year-olds back. These aren't moral failures. They're statistical realities of long lives. Social Security exists as a foundational safety net. If you need it, using it isn't a sign of poor planning. It's the entire point of the system. You paid into it for 40 years. It's there. The financial advisors who tell you to delay no matter what often have alternative income sources you don't. Their advice quietly assumes your situation looks like theirs. It may not. Section 4. When delaying actually makes sense. To be fair to the other side, there are clear scenarios where delaying until 70 is genuinely the right call. If you're in good health, with strong family longevity, if you have substantial savings outside of Social Security, if your spouse is also healthy and has a strong benefit of their own, and if your investment portfolio isn't reliably generating returns higher than about 8% annually, which, by the way, is the approximate annual return equivalent you get from delaying Social Security from 67 to 70. In those scenarios, delaying is essentially a guaranteed 8% return on your deferred benefit, backed by the federal government. That return is genuinely hard to beat anywhere else with similar safety. The point of this video isn't that 62 is the right answer. The point is that 70 isn't always the right answer either. The right answer depends on conditions that vary across millions of households. And anyone giving you a one-size-fits-all answer probably hasn't run the math against your specific situation. Section 5. The industry's quiet incentive. I want to flag one thing that's almost never said openly on YouTube. The financial planning industry has a structural incentive to tell you to delay. Most advisors earn fees as a percentage of the assets they manage for you. If you delay Social Security, two things tend to happen, and both of them benefit the advisor. First, in those early retirement years before you file, you draw down your portfolio harder, but the absolute dollar size of your portfolio is still large. You haven't taken Social Security yet, so you're forced to live on assets. Second, over the long run, delaying tends to result in a larger overall financial picture, more of which sits in managed accounts. The math is more complicated than that summary, but the simple version is this. The longer your investable portfolio stays large, the longer your advisor collects fees on it. Telling you to delay Social Security tends to keep that portfolio fuller longer. I'm not saying anyone is being corrupt. Most advisors genuinely believe delaying is the right call, and for many clients, it is. I'm saying it's a structural incentive worth knowing about. Anyone giving you advice on this, including me in this video, has incentives you should be aware of. Mine is simple. I'd rather give you a framework than a recommendation. The framework lets you make this decision against your own life, not against an average that doesn't describe anyone. So here's the question you should actually be asking. Not should I file at 62 or 70? That's the question the deleted calculator was trying to answer, and the agency that built it concluded the question couldn't be answered with a single number. The right question is, which of these 7 conditions describe my life right now? 3 practical takeaways before you go. First, run the break-even analysis, but run it 3 times. Once with the standard 84-year life expectancy, once with 3 years shorter, once with 3 years longer. If the optimal age flips between those 3 runs, you've learned something important. Your decision is sitting on a knife's edge, and you need more information before committing. Second, if you have a spouse, never analyze this in isolation. Always run it as a household model with spousal benefits and survivor benefits factored in. Most of the biggest mistakes I've seen people make in retirement planning come from running these numbers as if they were single. Third, if a market downturn hits, or you find yourself in a low-income year before RMDs, or your spouse's health deteriorates, those are exactly the moments to revisit the plan, not stick to the one you wrote in calm waters 5 years ago. The Social Security Administration didn't delete the calculator because the math was wrong. They deleted it because people were treating a starting point as a final answer. Don't be that person. If this gave you a sharper way to think about a decision most people only get one shot at, hit subscribe. I make a video like this every week, breaking down the financial math nobody else wants to put in a thumbnail. And one question for the comments. What's your current plan? File at 62, wait until full retirement age, or delay to 70? Drop your plan below. No judgment. I read every reply.